Hi everyone, I'm Rohn Strong and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that little bell notification so you'll know whenever I upload new videos. I try to upload new crochet tutorials every single week, new free patterns every week. It's a whole lot of fun. So today, if you're here, you're probably getting ready for the Tunisian crochet along, Tunisian crochet along, kind of redundant, Tunisian crochet along that we're going to be having here on YouTube and in my Facebook group at Rohn Strong's Crochet Club, which you can find the link to that down below, and on Instagram at Rohn Strong using the hashtag Rohn Strong CAL, so Rohn Strong Cal. All that information is down in the description below, as well as the blog post that kind of explains all about our Tunisian crochet along, the dates, everything, how it's all going to work. It's all right there. So make sure you click that link after this video if you want to go read up on our Tunisian Delight Sampler crochet along. So today is May 1st. This is our very first day, day one. We got to start from the ground up, and that means that we need to talk about gauge. Now, gauge is kind of a dirty word. I know a lot of people don't like to talk about it, especially us crocheters. We just don't like gauge, and I get it. It can be really tough to get gauge. Now, gauge is just the measurement of stitches and rows per inch. Often in a pattern, it's given over the multiple of 4 inches. So for example, in this pattern, our average gauge, now it's not always this, but our average gauge for each of the blocks that we'll make for our sampler Afghan is going to be 3 stitches and 3 rows per inch. Now I know what you're thinking, Ron, this is a sampler Afghan. We got 9 different stitches. Do I need to do 9 different gauge swatches? No, absolutely not. You just have to do one gauge swatch, which I'm going to show you how to do in this video today, and that's it. You only got to do it once, because once we know how the yarn and the hook are going to play together, we don't really got to worry about kind of how different stitches are going to work. The circumference of the hook and the weight of the yarn is really your biggest determining factors in gauge. And so once you have those down, and once you kind of get them spot on, or at least kind of close to spot on, then you don't got to worry about it again, which is really, really nice. So let's kind of talk about what makes Tunisian crochet and gauge kind of tricky. And then let's make our gauge swatch, which I'm going to show you how to do today. And I'm going to give you a primer on how to work Tunisian Simple Stitch. So if you've never worked Tunisian Simple Stitch before, or any Tunisian crochet, don't worry. By the end of this video, you're absolutely going to know how to do it. All right, so now that the introductions are over, let's talk a little bit about our Tunisian Delight Sampler Afghan and gauge. Now, every square is a different stitch, and while our gauge will be slightly different with each one, I didn't change my hook size for any of the squares. I just kind of kept it the same, and all the squares turned out the same size, and that's primarily because Tunisian crochet is really, really, really easy to kind of fix and fuss with the row gauge. Stitch gauge is going to be a little bit more difficult, which I'm going to talk about today. But primarily what we're going to do is make a gauge swatch together. I'm going to show you how to work the Tunisian Simple Stitch, how to work your foundation rows, how to get started, all that good stuff, and how to end your swatch. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about yarn and hooks. So your yarn and your hook are kind of the 2 biggest factors when it comes to Tunisian crochet and getting gauge versus not getting gauge. Now, I have a full blog post all about this, which I'll link in the description down below if you want more information about gauge. There's the written pattern for this gauge swatch is also located there. So if you want to go check that out, I know some people like to follow a written pattern more than a video tutorial, so that's the option as well. So these are 2 different types of swatches, or 2 different types of yarn in the same swatch. We have Red Heart Super Saver in this light blue aqua, and we have Vanna's Choice in this kind of dusty blue color. I also worked them with a straight Tunisian hook and a corded Tunisian hook. Now, here's the deal. Every worsted weight yarn is going to react differently to gauge, and whether you're using a corded hook or a straight hook, it's also going to affect your gauge. So it's very important that you pay attention to those little things. For today, with this gauge swatch, make sure you're using the exact yarn that you're going to use in your Tunisian Delight Sampler Afghan, and you're going to use the exact same hook that you would use. We can make adjustments to the hook later on if we're noticing our gauge is a little bit off. but just make sure you're using the exact yarn and the exact hook that you're going to use in the crochet along. That's really important, all right? So let's get started crocheting. I think that's the best place to kind of jump in, and we'll talk along the way. So we're going to learn how to do Tunisian Simple Stitch. If you've already done Tunisian Simple Stitch, this is going to be a breeze for you. If you haven't done Tunisian Simple Stitch, and you really know nothing about Tunisian crochet, then I'm going to show you. Now I'm going to be using Caron 1 pound. I have it in this beautiful color, which is called Golden Yellow. This is a beautiful color, and it's a lot of fun to crochet up. This was what I used in my original sampler Afghan. I used Caron 1 pound, and I really, really, really like it. So to work on our gauge swatch, the very first thing we're going to do is grab our yarn and grab our hook of choice. I'm going to be using a corded hook for today's class, and that's simply because it's not going to bang on the table as much as a straight hook would. I'm going to place a slip knot on my crochet hook, and now I'm going to chain. So I'll chain 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So we have a chain of 20. Next, I'm going to insert my hook into the second chain from the hook. I'm going to yarn over my hook and pull up a loop. I'll have 2 loops on my hook at this point. Then insert your hook into the next chain. Yarn over and pull up a loop. I'll have 3 loops on my hook. Insert your hook into the next chain and pull up a loop. Insert your hook into the next chain and pull up a loop. You're simply going to repeat that process all the way across the row. Now this is called our foundation row. Every single Tunisian crochet stitch, almost every single, starts with your foundation row. And it's just picking up loops and working across. Now that I'm at the end, you can see I have 20 loops on my hook. Now, this is a great reason to point out why we have a cord. We put the cord on our hook to keep these stitches from sliding off the end of our crochet hook. And you can see why just using a standard crochet hook wouldn't be optimal, because then all of your stitches would be bunched up near the top and they would be kind of itching to spring off the head of your hook. And you don't want that. So to do your return pass, this return pass is worked the same in almost all of Tunisian crochet. Now there are some times when it's a little bit different, and the pattern will always state that it's different. But for the sake of today and for the sake of our Tunisian Simple Stitch, it's going to be the same every single row. We simply chain 1, then we yarn over our hook and we pull through 2 loops. So 1 and 2. Yarn over our hook, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. And we simply yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across the row. Now sometimes when I'm teaching these classes in person, one of the most confusing things that trips students up is when they get to the end here and they have 3 loops on their hook. Because sometimes our brain says, but wait, if I pull through 2, I'm only going to have 1 loop left. But remember, you're going to yarn over, pull through 2, and still have 2 loops left on your hook. Then you'll yarn over, pull through 2, and be left with 1 loop on your hook. In Tunisian crochet, you should always have 1 loop left on your hook. If there's ever a time where you're sitting there and your crochet hook is empty, you've kind of done something wrong, so it's easier to back up and figure out where you went wrong. But you should always have 1 loop left on your hook. So that's our foundation row. It's simply a row of vertical bars worked into a regular old foundation chain that gets us all set up to work our the next few rows. All right, so to work our Tunisian Simple Stitch, we're simply going to take our hook and working from right to left, we're going to go underneath that first vertical bar. So you'll see it's really easy to see all these vertical bars. We're simply going to go right to left under that first vertical bar, yarn over our hook and pull up a loop. And do the same thing in the next stitch. Work from right to left under the next vertical bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. Under the next bar, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. So we're going to repeat that all the way across the row. Until we get to the very end. And now when we get to the last stitch, what we're going to do is instead of just going under that next or that last vertical bar, we're going to insert our hook into that stitch. So we're going to go actually into and through the stitch to the back, yarn over, pull up a loop, and it should look something like that. And then we work our return pass. So we chain one just like before, yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through two. And we're going to repeat that all the way across the row, getting us right back to the beginning when we have one loop on our hook. So let's do that row one more time together. Working from right to left, insert your hook under the first vertical bar to the left of the loop that's on our hook. Yarn over your hook and pull through. Repeat that process working from right to left underneath the vertical bars, yarning over our hook and pulling through the vertical bar and leaving the loop on your hook. Remember, at the end of this forward pass, you should have 20 loops on your hook. That accounts for 19 total slip stitches and the one loop that was on our hook that counts as our first stitch. Remember, when we get to the end, you're not going to go under the vertical bar, you'll go through the stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Then we yarn over and chain one, yarn over, pull through two, pull through two, pull through two, all the way back to the beginning until we have just one loop left on our hook. Now, I'm going to recommend that you work this row until you have a total of at least 10 rows. You could go up to 20 rows, but 10 rows is the minimum. That's going to allow your stitches and your tension to even out if you've never worked Tunisian crochet before. And if you have, but maybe you're a little rusty, it allows you to get back in the hang of things. Once you've reached your last row, you're going to work what's called a Tunisian slip stitch. And it's really just a slip stitch that we would do in normal crochet, but because we're doing it in Tunisian, they call it a Tunisian slip stitch. It's worked a little bit differently. We'll take our hook and insert it from right to left under the next vertical bar and yarn over and pull up a loop. We'll have two loops on our hook, one near the head of our hook and one on the shaft of our hook. We're going to pull the loop that's near the head of our hook through the loop that's on the shaft, just as if we're slip stitching. We're going to insert our hook into the next stitch and pull up a loop, and then pull through. Pull up and through. And that's it. And you can really get going on this. And that's all there is. And then you get to the end, you break your yarn, and you have your swatch. Now, like I said, I did a couple different swatches. I did one out of Red Heart Super Saver, and I did one out of Vanna's Choice. And that's because I really wanted to see if there was going to be a difference in gauge between the two yarns. And there wasn't a huge difference in gauge, but there was a slight difference. The Red Heart Super Saver swatch was a little bit smaller, but I was able to block it out by simply stretching it just a touch. Remember in our introduction, I said that you can kind of get away with it being just a little bit, your gauge being just a little bit under. So this worked out pretty well, this experiment. I was really happy to see that the yarns were playing well together. So let's talk a little bit about why you would change crochet hook sizes. So if your swatch and your gauge was a little bit off than what the pattern tells you, you would need to go up or down a hook size. You can tell that I have two swatches here that are, one is obviously smaller and one's larger. And that's just to show you that by changing the hook one size, I was able to create a swatch that was much larger using the same yarn, the same amount of stitches, and the same amount of rows. So let's talk about how to measure gauge to see if you do have to go up or down a hook size. This is a clear acrylic quilting ruler, and this is something that I keep in my knitting bag. I am a quilter, but I think this is great for measuring gauge. If I lay this on top of my work, and I'll probably be able to see a little bit better with this darker color here. If I lay this on my work, I'll be able to hold it on top, and there's a 1/2 inch margin all around because this is 4.5 inches. So I'm just going to kind of line it up and make sure it's right where it needs to be. And this is my 4-inch section. I'm just going to count the number of stitches I have across. So to count the number of stitches, I'm going to count the number of V's that there are next to the vertical bars. So I'm going to begin by counting just to the right of the vertical bar where the edge of my ruler is on. And I have 1, 2, 3, and I'm counting those horizontal V's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It looks like my gauge is turning out to be about 12.5 stitches per 4 inches. Now, obviously, that's not what the pattern calls for, which is 12 stitches. But because it's just a 1/2 stitch, I know that going up a hook size is going to be way too much. So what I would need to do is just simply block this by giving it a little bit of a stretch in order to get to that 3 stitches per inch or 12 stitches per 4 inches gauge. Now the row gauge will count it the same way. So with that in mind, I'm happy with this gauge. And I would encourage you that if you're getting around the same numbers as I am, that you should be happy as well. Don't stress out too much if it's a little bit under or a little bit over. Because I was only a 1/2 stitch over what I actually needed for those 4 inches, that means that every inch I'm just about a 1/4 stitch off. So it's not that big of a deal. Now what happens if you're way off? Let's say that you're getting 4 stitches per inch instead of 3 stitches per inch and 4 rows per inch instead of 3 rows per inch. Well, then you need to go up a hook size. I would recommend going from a 6.5 millimeter crochet hook up to an 8 millimeter crochet hook. Now conversely, if you are getting 2 stitches per inch and 2 rows per inch, go down a hook size, maybe to a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. And I know that seems like a lot, but when it comes to crochet hooks, 0.5 millimeters is really not going to do too much, but a full millimeter change from a J to an I, or sorry, from a K to an I, or from a K to an L is going to have a much more impactful difference than just going up or down one hook size. Well, that's all I have to say about gauge. Remember, there's a blog post all about gauge and the written directions for this pattern. You can find those on the blog post, which the link is in the description down below. Almost didn't get that out. If you ever have any questions about gauge and you're not really sure what to do, or if you're feeling like you're doing something wrong, remember, you can head to my Facebook group, Rohn Strong's Crochet Club. The link for that will be in the description down below as well. And you can always follow me on Instagram at Rohn Strong, and I will always be there to answer as many questions as I possibly can. We're a really active community, and there'll be other people that can help you out there as well. Now, next week, we have 3 blocks. We're going to be doing the Tunisian knit stitch, simple stitch, and reverse stitch. Those are really fun, really, really cool stitches. So, hope you're ready. But you got to do the gauge swatch first. That's the rule. You got to do your gauge swatch first. So, until next week, friends, happy stitching. Bye, guys.